Greetings, friends. It's time for our weekly study in Galatians, and Jody and I absolutely loved listening to your thoughts last week. Really encouraged us. And, last week we saw that Christianity is to be viewed as a rescue. Jesus gave himself for our sins to rescue us. We were thinking, he didn't just give a hem of his garment to heal us. He gave his broken body to rescue us from sin. His blood poured out for our forgiveness, and so he gave himself for us. Now, if you and I want to be free from the power of sin today, we must hear the message of the cross again, put faith in it again, and embrace and hold fast to this one message. If we turn from this one message of the cross, we desert God himself. And that's what the Galatians were doing. As we'll see in this week's study, Paul writes in chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, "I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ, and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ." Now notice this one thought here, and that is that the message of the cross and God himself are one. When the Galatians had turned to a different message, they were deserting God himself, the one who called them to live by grace. When the Galatians believed this message, they received God by his Spirit. Now that they are turning to some other message, they were deserting God. The message and God are one and the same. You remember in John 1, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God," and what? The Word was God. So the Word is God's communication to man. It's God's message to man. And what? The Word was God. And so when we turn from the message God gives us, then we're deserting God himself. As Paul says, "I'm astonished." He said, "I'm shocked." The word means to be aghast or to be appalled, to clamp your hand over your mouth. An example might be, do you remember this story in Leviticus 26:32 where God is threatening to destroy the whole promised land because of the sins of his people? And he says this, "I myself will lay waste the land so that your enemies who live there will be appalled," aghast at what happened. Paul looks at the land of the Galatians. He's looking out over them. And they are being laid waste by false teaching. They're deserting God, and Paul is appalled. Why? Because he knows that if they turn from the message of the cross, they're deserting God. And the word deserting is used in verse 7. Did you see it there? Some people are trying to pervert. It's the same word. Desert and pervert are the same word. This perverting and deserting is the opposite of what the Corinthians did. Do you remember that in 1 Corinthians 15 where Paul says, "I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand." Taken your stand. The Corinthians had planted both feet at the cross, and then, as it were, they poured cement. So they couldn't move. They took their stand on the message of the cross. I have two questions for you to consider. Number one, can you see from Galatians 1, 6, and 7 that the message of the cross and God himself are one? Do you see that? Question 2, can you relate to the Galatians? Have you ever been, for example, in a group of people who were presenting another gospel to free you from sin, a gospel that left out the cross? That is, a message that left out the cross. Can you relate? Please do share your thoughts as able. I really look forward to hearing from you. There's 5 minutes.